Okay, welcome to the second part of this symbol puzzle mock walkthrough. You should already have looked at section C, so now we're going to look at section D. Right, let's crack straight on. This is, I would say, at least 60% as a bare minimum. I want to say 90% chance of coming up in the real exam. It's one of the really classic bits of validation that's missing. They don't have to do it, but they tend to. And it's the idea that at the moment you can enter values for row and column outside of the grid size. You could add them so that they still don't return an error and they actually place values into the 0th element of the array that aren't displayed, or you could put it outside of the array range, in which case you get an out of range error. So there's a couple of possibilities to go wrong, but you can handle them both with range. Okay, in the question it said make sure all these are handled. At the moment these are already handled because the code has got try catches. The reason why or the exam board will often put them in is because you need to make sure that your code doesn't screw that up. Right, let's have a look at the code. Bosh. I'm not going to bother coding this live. Right, we're in attempt puzzle. It said that in the question, and this is what you've currently got. This is the clean version. Okay, so you can see the try catches, but there are no ranges in there. Right, let's flick to my solution. Bosh. I've got the little marks, well, the sort of semi-mark scheme things in there, just for my own remembrance. So I've done this on a wanna. You may prefer to have your if statement like that. Who cares? Doesn't matter. If I've only got one thing happening, I quite like to put it all on one line, but it doesn't really make a difference. Right, things to note. Make sure it's a greater than or equal to, because that grid size is the upper bound of the grid. And we need to be greater than 0, not greater or equal to 0, because the 0th element of the array, which is not handled, is not being used. So we are going from 1 to grid size. Of course, you know that this is not a 2D array anyway. This is a 1D array that's got a method that plays around with it, and we'll look at that in a moment. But yeah, that's it. So basically I gave you 1 mark for the lower bound, 1 mark for the upper bound. You got another mark for getting both of the columns bits correct, and your final mark was making sure that you put it inside the try catch in a way that doesn't screw anything up. Is the rough gist. Okay, testing, do exactly what it says. You will often be given exactly a sequence to go through. Just follow the sequence and do exactly what it says. This is what it should look like in the EAD. So I have copied and pasted, not grabbed. I've copied and pasted my code, making sure it's in light mode. Having it in colour makes it massively easier for the examiner. So do it in colour, and we'll print it in colour as well. Have I done the whole of attempt puzzle? No, but I've made sure I've had a couple of lines above and below just so I can do it. If you had a few extra lines, who cares? But if you put huge great wadges in, it's not really worth it. Some people like to highlight what the changes they've made. Lovely, I'm not against that. But I think if you're just giving the section of code, that's fine. And I've got my testing, I actually made my console window a little bit bigger, just dragged it bigger, and then I used Alt Print Screen to capture what I need to capture. Right, that's the first question sorted. Okay, question 12. If I'm honest, I don't think this is going to come up. I think this will come up in section C, just like I've done it before, but it's going to come up somewhere. And I also made a bit of a balls up because I gave you specific ranges to type in, and of course the blocked cells are random, so you might not be able to fill in those grids. I guess if you were going to do this, you would do it in a load puzzle where you know the blocked cells are. That's fine. I wish I'd thought about that. So create a new letter, or a new symbol I should say, bish bash bosh. This is a 2-second job. So how do I attempt it? Look at where symbols are currently defined as patterns. Basically, as you will often find with questions, you can just copy a pasta, so I can copy that, paste it in there, tidy up your indents, and then just change this. Whatever happens to be. Let's cut to the real one. Let me cut to the real one. And I've been quite generous, I would say, with the marks for this. But 1 mark for getting the pattern, 1 mark for doing the other 2 bits. What does that look like in the EAD? I have just done these 3. Really, I should have put in a couple of lines above and below this just to be sure. And there's the testing. So 4 marks in total for that, 2 marks for the pattern, 1 mark for the adding to the allowed patterns, and 1 mark for allowing you to the allowed symbols. And I don't know why it's a couple, I guess just because it's so long. I think it was 1 mark for, it's 1 mark for the U being created. Annoyingly, I put an extra one in there. And then 1 mark for it returning the correct score. And you, in a later question, you can screw that up if you're not careful. So we'll look at that in a second. Okay, I'm 100% convinced, either in section C, but I believe in section D, you are going to be creating a new type of cell. The one that I've created is pretty donkey, but it was more that I wanted you to get a feel for how to do this. I'm convinced the real one will be more annoying than this. But I created enough rules that you actually had to read what to do and be careful. Quite a few of you are asking me, oh, you know, what does this mean? What does that mean? I'm pretty sure this is all unambiguous. So you have got to learn just to read and to just do it. All right. So very, very, very common that you get asked to do a series of tasks, and then you get asked to put the evidence for those tasks in particular boxes. I do tend to do the whole thing all in one go, but I completely understand if you'd want to do task 1 and then evidence task 1, do task 2, evidence task 2. I don't think it really makes a difference. The only reason why doing it as you go would be slightly better is, of course, if you started to run out of time, it'd be a real killer if you did a load of this evidence and then didn't actually get it into the EAD. Right, let's have a little look at it. Create a new class called supercell blah blah blah. Right, I'm going to cut straight to my solution so you can see how it works. In fact, so bosh. Right, so I've got supercell here. It took me about 10 seconds to do this. I copied block cell, pasted it, changed a couple of things. If you don't know what any of this syntax means, you need to blinking well look it up. But the idea that I've got a class that extends or inherits, that I've defined my constructor, and I'm saying please execute the constructor from the parent, and obviously I've got to change the symbol. You do need to have this method in. If you don't understand this method, you need to sort of check what does this actually mean. For the block, basically what it's doing is ensuring that you don't you're not allowed to overwrite this cell. In another version, you might be allowed to overwrite it. So if we look back to our original cell, we've got a little thing that actually checks to see if it's in there, and if it's not in that, symbol's not allowed, which is a bit weird. Symbol's not allowed to overwrite, I guess. Then where are we? Yeah, there we go. Then it would allow it, but if it's in there, you're not allowed it. Well, in this case, we know that we don't want to allow it, so we're just going to return false every single time. There's no if statement to add. The reason why there's the if statement in the previous one is because if it's blank, you want to be able to add to a cell. If you've got oh my goodness, Joe, if you've got a symbol that is not allowed in there, and that's pretty much any symbol you've added, then it needs to be not allowed. It's a bit of a convoluted way of doing it, which makes me think maybe there'll be a weird thing where you're allowed to overwrite. Oh, I don't know. Maybe you're allowed to write things once. That'd be quite a nice extension. Anyway, that's the class. Job done. So we've now ticked this off. For these big questions, I really would be highlighting these as I go, just so I've done that for you. Modify the constructor method is a supercell. Right, I'm now in puzzle class. It's in the constructor, and basically you need to understand, am I on my clean one? No, I'm on mine. Does it matter where you stick this? Yeah, a little bit. I think you probably ought to do it after this, so you can just overwrite it. And I'm just hard overwriting 2-2. Right, here's what we need to understand about a grid. The grid is, I don't know if it's deliberately a pain in the arse, but it is a pain in the arse. So grid is a 1D array. Going from top to bottom, so therefore 9, 9 is element 1. Is it not? It's 8, 8, isn't it? So I'm an idiot. 8, 8 is element 1, and therefore 1, 1 is element 56. No, 49. And therefore we want 2, 2, so you have to basically back calculate it. I'll tell you what, at the end of this, I'll produce a grid with all of the array element indexes on, but you really ought to do that. Yeah, 49 is 2, 2. I guess it would be yeah, that's good. There'll be something where you have to hard code something in there so they can check to see if you understand the grid. Right, so that's task 2 sorted. So let's scribble that out somehow. Bosh. Sorry, task 1b. Task 2, create a new method in the puzzle class that is called check for supercell. Check for supercell return. Okay, right. So let's go back to our code. Let's minimize that so it's out of the way. So we've got something that does something similar already. Check for match with pattern. Okay, this is the thing that actually returns 10 if you make a pattern. And you can see that it's basically doing a check around where you currently are placed. And it seems really overly convoluted. I couldn't really find an easy way of doing this. There must be, but it's in a nested for loop, and then we've got a big old check each time. So, no, where am I? Check for supercell. Check for supercell is a bit easier. If you hard coded this, but it's hard coded relative to the row and column that you placed it in, that's fine. Okay. If I'm going to be strict, this actually also checks the 9th, the middle square. So it goes -1, -1, -1, 0. You get the idea. I'm not going to, but I don't care. It doesn't matter if it checks itself. But if you did do all 8 relative to the row and column, so you had something that looks a little bit like this, that's absolutely fine. I am convinced you're going to have to do something in your code where you have to do a check relative to your position on the grid. So make sure you understand what this is doing, column and row. You also need to be really sure that you understand what this get cell is. But I'll come to that in a second. I've stuck into a try except pass purely because if I'm on the edge of the grid and I go add 1 to it, so I go off the edge of the array or off the edge of the grid, then that causes me a problem. Or I might check the sort of bit where you sort of loop round like on Pac-Man. So basically I need just to do a try catch to make sure that's going to work. This does have an ever so slight problem still with exactly what happens, but this is 99% okay how this works. And the basic gist is, if in any of the adjacent squares it spots this, checking that. Let's just quickly go to get a cell so we can see how it works. Pick definition. So this converts a row and column into the index of the grid. Okay. Effectively, all it's doing is counting backwards what the array index position is. I'll let you work that out. But you really, if you haven't played with this, play with it. I go to the peak. Right, okay, and effectively I return 0 if there isn't a supercell in range, and I return 20 if there is, because that's what I've got asked to do. Right, that's been done. Bosh. Change the method attempt puzzle so the return is added to the score. You have to be careful for this one. So let's go back to attempt puzzle. Bosh. So let's get rid of that for a second. Where are we? Get rid of that. So this is the code that checks for a match with pattern. And you can see that it makes amount to add score equal to the 10. If I just did this equals to, it would clear this if there isn't a supercell, even if I did have a match pattern. So you just need to be careful to append it, or call this something else and then add it later on. I don't really care, but I think that's the neatest way, just to iterate 20 to it, or whatever it's returned. So that's my little line that will add to it, and I'm just being careful not to overwrite that, but to add to it. Bosh. Test the changes, yagga yagga yagga. And I've been careful to I'm not really bothered assessing if you've handled that try catch, but hopefully it will work. Should we look what that looks all like on the EAD? Let's EAD come. Right, there's my class. I don't need to put anything else. Do you know what? I have just put that instantiation. I really should have put a couple of lines above and below just so they can see where it is. Just so they can see where it is actually placed. That's naughty. Obviously for the new method I can just do the method. Again, I probably ought to have that. Look, I didn't put the plus there. Again, I should have a bit of context. And here I've done what they've asked me for testing. And believe it or not, that's the whole thing done. Bish, bash and bosh. Everything I've gone through, you need to make sure you understand the syntax of the code and you understand how the code's working. If there's something that you don't understand, pester myself or Lucy, or stick the whole code in and ask ChatGPT exactly what's going on. That's not bad, but ask me or Lucy probably first, because you do need to know exactly how this is all working.